Well, for more on what to expect in Libya, we're going to turn to someone who specializes in the economies of key oil-producing countries. Helima Croft is a senior geopolitical strategist in the Commodities Research Group at Barclays Capital, and she joins us now from her office in New York. Welcome back, Helima. Always great to have you on Fast Forward, particularly in these complicated situations in the Middle East. And you have a slightly different view, perhaps, than what traders are telling us anyway. We're seeing Brent crude falling, suggesting that's perhaps supply coming back online out of Libya, but you say be careful.
Yeah, we think it could be difficult to restart production. I think there's a sentiment in the markets right now that you can quickly resume 1.3 million barrels of Libyan exports. And when you have statements from rebel officials saying we can get back up and running in 2 to 3 weeks, I think people believe it'll all come back. But we remain very cautious. First of all, we don't know very much about the Libyan rebels. There's a transitional government that's 31 people. They haven't had elections. We don't know how representative they are. And then there are questions about, frankly, has there been significant damage to the export infrastructure? We have heard there has been damage, for example, to the Brega export terminal, and that could take time to repair. And the last thing I think everyone needs to keep in mind is if you have a significant political power vacuum in Libya post-Qaddafi, it'll be very difficult for companies to restart production. So I think a key question going forward is if we see a deterioration in the security environment in Libya, will the international community really step up to stabilize the situation? And I don't want to be alarmist, but I think we have to look back to 2003 in Baghdad. There was tremendous optimism when Saddam Hussein fell. I remember the cheering in the streets of Baghdad, but a couple months later we were talking about a deadly insurgency that claimed thousands of lives of U.S. soldiers, cost hundreds of billions of dollars, and we did not see Iraqi production come back to pay for the reconstruction costs. So I think it'll be incumbent on the international community to step up and stabilize Libya.
Helima, you and I were talking right before this show about this past year, events in the Middle East, North Africa, really historic, that we're going to look back at this and it will have changed the course of the Middle East and North Africa. Help us connect the dots in understanding what's happened there in the last year, what it could mean for the economies locally, what we should be paying close attention to, and what, in your mind, is the biggest priority at this point in that region.
Well, I think it's been an absolute seismic shift in the Middle East. If you had asked anyone a year ago whether we would have Hosni Mubarak out of power by street demonstrations, I think people would have thought that was unimaginable. So the changes that we've seen taking place, you've had the leader of Tunisia gone, Hosni Mubarak in Egypt, and now it looks like Muammar Qaddafi. It's sort of a shocking turn of events. Now, on the one hand, you could say it all looks great because it shows that the popular will is being sort of reflected. But I think a question is, what is going to be the economic orientation of the regimes that come to power? And one of the concerns, for example, when we look at Egypt is, will the new Egyptian government have to be more populist in orientation to meet the demands of the demonstrators in Tahrir Square? So if we see the return of subsidies, if we see policies that are less friendly to foreign investment, that could mean that, for the investment environment may not be as optimistic going forward. Now, when we look at Libya, the guy who heads the Transitional National Council is somebody who had been part of the sort of economic reform team in Libya. So he is seen as very investor friendly. But the question there is, if you have an unstable political environment, will foreign investors flock back to the country?
And then quickly, Helima, can you just explain, I've been talking about NYMEX versus Brent crude. We're actually seeing NYMEX crude up today. Brent crude not quite as low as it was earlier in the day, but it is falling off, and just the impact of Libya on those two prices.
Well, Libya is a light sweet crude that feeds the European refineries. So that's why we're seeing the sell-off in Brent today, because it's the sense that we can get that Libyan production back going to the European refineries.
All right, Helima, always a pleasure to have you. Appreciate your insight. That was Helima Croft, Director and Senior Geopolitical Strategist at Barclays Capital, joining us today to give us her perspective on what is happening in Libya and how that may impact oil prices.